we meet this last time to kind of share some of our thoughts and lean. Oh, we'll start again. Hi, let's pray. Lord, we thank you for this conversation around this book, and we pray your guidance as we conclude it today. We glean the kind of the last insights from it. And I do pray that as we consider them, we would find ways that we can incorporate some of what we've learned into our lives, that it would go forth also into our community as acts of love. Go ahead and dig in here. So if you remember this from the book about blister packs, so how did the blister packs and natural gas ovens in the United Kingdom lower suicide deaths there? What's the correlation? What difference do those things make?
Well, the blister packs made it take longer for a person who wanted to, take too many pills. It just made it more of a process to take longer to get enough pills. And so it gave them more time to think things through. And that lowered suicides.
Is that what do you think about that? I mean,
It's before my time
what's that?
that they started to add I started to add the scent to the gas on the heating system.
Oh, the gas.
But in fact, that's a misstatement because we had coal furnace, and so I don't know. But
Yeah.
I think it was before my time that they switched to the gas you could smell.
Well, this seems like a different kind of, if I read it correctly, they switched to natural gas from other forms of gas that they were using for their stoves.
So
But-
less carbon monoxide.
Yeah. So these little shifts make a dent in suicide rates in the United Kingdom. Any reaction to that? Any I don't know, surprise, or it seemed pretty straightforward?
Mhm.
I appreciate the book in the sense of the data, because we just hear things thrown out, or people, and you think, well, is that really true? So I appreciate that aspect of their research and
Mhm.
book.
I do too, and some people will still deny the data. You can just do anything with statistics. I'm certain. It's unfortunate that that's what some people are at.
It sounds like a simple solution, and yet somebody's bound to ask, what's it gonna cost more?
Mhm.
Yeah, well, I think what they're getting at here, obviously, these little changes making a difference that we may not, fully understand, or that seem quite dramatic for something, so little, to do. And I would think that, gosh, why didn't they think about doing some of these things, before? How can we use some of the same principles of making, I might say, these little changes, incremental kinds of changes? How can we use that and apply it toward reducing gun deaths in America?
Maybe there could be a delayed trigger of some sort. I am not very mechanical, but you pull the trigger, but it doesn't do anything for a period of time. 10, 15, 20 years, I don't know.
But they have biometrics now for guns that you could individualize them to where only a certain fingerprint will pull the trigger. And, there are some technical advances they can make, and the gun makers are ready to make safer guns, and the gun lobby folks, Second Amendment folks, won't go for it. Absolutely. And any manufacturer that does that, they'll boycott.
So one incremental piece could be something along the line of smart. I don't know what you call that, but yeah.
The first question here is really aimed at suicides.
Uh-huh.
So are you asking about suicides by gun?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, opportunity was mentioned way early in this book, opportunity and access to guns. I think that's the big one. I just wish we had political leaders who would find their spine and stand up to the NRA. I just think it's ridiculous that we can't find any common ground to really reform who can buy and hold guns in our society.
I wonder about, I know the NRA has this lobby kind of machine, and I just wonder if our lawmakers hear enough from the rest of us. Do they get lobbied enough by all the rest of us?
I think they're starting to hear clamor. The problem is, you kind of hear what you want to hear. And what really talks in politics is donors. Amazingly, just even somebody who gives $100 is on the radar as a supporter. And voters who don't give any money are just, they're just there. So when it comes to the NRA, of course, they've got big bucks. And some of the entrenched politicians or even the newcomers, they want that money to finance their campaign and election.
It's also a matter of the conservative media and the politicians or followers, and they're not gonna go up against
They're not gonna,
the conservative media, or they figure they can't get reelected.
yeah. I think the real disservice is that the NRA position is not to give an inch. Because the feeling is give an inch and they're gonna come back and they're gonna take a mile. So we just can't even go there. We just can't even crack the door open.
The messaging is to the extreme. They're gonna
Exactly.
take all our guns.
They're gonna take your guns, you're gonna.
It's an extreme message.
But I think you could implement something like, I understand that driving is not in our constitution as a right, but we all take tests to be able to drive, right? We all take a driving exam. We all get our eyes checked every, how often we need to have our license done. I'm not saying different states don't have different, levels of stringency when it comes to that. But like, you would think it could be something even like, just to make sure for a suicide situation, like having a person go through like a screening to make sure it doesn't, if they already have it, it doesn't help that, but if they're going out there with the purpose of purchasing a gun to commit suicide, it might stave off some of that situation.
Yeah, there could be, some elements of bolstering or enforcing current laws, regulations. So that the mechanisms are there, if a background check is mandatory, one mechanism could be that same process applies to all sales of guns and not just to ones from licensed, vendors. And it could also, whether it's ways to gather data and track that so that, that information is shared more. I mean, there's a lot of probably infrastructure kinds of elements. There was the one example of, was it in Charleston, the shooter that there was a hold period, and if the FBI did not complete their check within that time frame, then the sale goes ahead anyway, and that's exactly what happened in that instance. And so there's a lot of elements, there's a lot of little moving parts and things beyond some of the bigger higher fruit, I suppose, higher up the tree. Like, banning certain styles of weapons or something like that. But one takeaway I just want to, that I had from this is, again, the idea of these little sorts of things that do add up. Our blister pack's the only thing that reduced, suicides and so on. There's all kinds of different, this was the data they have for the blister pack piece had to do with suicide deaths in a particular manner. And of course, one of the arguments is that, well, people are just going to find another way to commit suicide. However, they also point out that, guns are pretty lethal and there's no backing, there's no, rarely any backing away from that. As opposed to some other form of suicide attempt somebody might make, so on. So, but there are these little elements that kind of add up, and I think one of the things that I hear a lot in some of these debates is that, well, somebody will propose whatever, some idea, some piece of legislation, and somebody else will say, well, that's not going to work. As if that one thing is going to make all the difference. And I think that, what we're hearing from seeing in this book is that it's really a lot of things. And so maybe one element, maybe a prayer for our country is that we can break away from this idea that, one thing is gonna, that we're always trying to hit the home run. And if we can't hit the home run, we're not gonna do anything. And, that hopefully there are strides. I don't think we got where we are overnight. They had that piece about the NRA as a for instance, and they talked about how the NRA has changed over time and the advocacy that they have, that the NRA used to support, certain types of restrictions on guns, gun ownership and so on. That would be a whole nother book, right? A whole nother study.
But it does bring up that sense that like, there are people who are going to go through with it no matter what, but there are a large percentage of people that if just something interrupts their plan.
Yes.
Whether it's slowing it down or a missed opportunity or whatever, that might be the difference between them not carrying out whatever that act is, whether it's suicide or an outward,
Yeah.
So I think it tells you that a lot of people make those decisions in a moment of despair and crisis, when if they really sat down and thought about it, they might not carry it out.
Well, also the difference between holding the thought and taking the action. So, you're prepared to take the action, but something stops you. Now you're back in the thought.
I'm maybe not sure if
Yeah,
I'm not sure if I understand
Oh.
all of it.
Well, because, okay, so I'm trying to open the blister packs and as I'm fumbling around, it's
Yeah.
like, well, darn it, this is what I really want to do. As opposed to just
Yeah.
popping them in there,
Or pulling the trigger.
reconsidering.
Yeah, in counseling, often taught to, if we suspect that a person is suicidal, to ask them what their plan is. And they have a plan. And so to interrupt that plan in some way gives the people close to them time to seek help. Because they hadn't thought about anything else. This is how I want to do it. And this is either going to be the least painful or make the most impact or whatever their thought process is. And we interrupt that by saying, what's your plan? I mean, how many times have you gone to a doctor and the doctor asks if you're suicidal? And what's your plan? I have been asked that many times.
You fill out the little.
Yeah, the little circle things, yeah.
Good transition actually into the next question about the act of making somebody feel like they've been seen. So it's kind of a two-part question. What does that mean? From the book, and maybe remember that, and you can look it up on page 150. And then how can we practice that in the church? I mean, it seems like this is a perfect place to do that. So what are they talking about there? The idea of making somebody feel like they've been seen, and how might that help for gun violence? Remember the Great Clips example they use? Right? What are they supposed to say when you go into Great Clips? What brings you here today?
Oh.
Yeah, what brings you here today?
Do you have an appointment?
Yeah, in fact, I actually asked Becca if she goes to Great Clips. She said, well, they don't always say that. They might say something else. Have you checked in online? But what brings you here today? And this is from the expert that works with organizations on I don't know what the term was, but, kind of, was it like a soft barriers or something like that, to, for situational crime prevention. So, yeah, the idea is, so walking into Great Cliffs Hair Salon in America, and someone at the front desk will ask, what brings you here today? The answer is obvious, haircut. But the question gets people talking, it opens up dialogue. Dialogue's important because it allows someone to begin to probe for verbal and nonverbal cues of harmful intent or actions incongruous, I guess, with the space. He uses the 2015 Charleston shooting as an example. A white supremacist walks into a Bible study at a historically Black church carrying a bag full of guns and ammo, and not one person greeted him to ask what he was doing there.
I thought that was odd. I didn't know that. That really wasn't dialogue with, which seems odd.
Any,
And yet, how many churches? I mean, I've been in a lot of different churches, and there have been many times, nobody has ever greeted.
Yeah.
Nobody's ever said one word.
That was a circle in a Bible study. I mean, it was
Yeah,
a church service.
I can picture even that happening.
Well, it's because we don't know them or when you're doing it.
so this, Osama, I think is his name. He says that if somebody had approached him that day, he might not have gone through with the crime. That it might have been, might have been enough. Not so much to blame the victims, but as a, kind of as an example. And, now, I mean, I think it's a good practice to kind of greet people anyway, but especially people that, whose presence might seem kind of out of place. Now, it might sound judgmental, in some regard, and we don't know, but I think there is a certain reality. We might say to people, come as you are and that sort of thing. And I think that's all true, but at the same time, look around the table, look at how, look at our appearance and everything. There's there's a certain sense of, maybe an unwritten sense of what, we kind of know about, like, this community. Yeah. What's that? And belonging, yeah.
I wanted to comment about churches. I went to a missionary alliance church for a while. And the very first time my husband and I went there, a woman came up to us immediately and handed us a little bag of cookies and said, "We're so glad you're here today. My name is so-and-so. I do the cookie ministry. We hope you'll come back. What's your name? Do you live here in the community?" I mean, she was warm and engaging, and here was this bag of cookies. It was the most welcoming feeling I've ever had in a church, to be honest. It's like, wow, somebody took the time to make cookies and ask our name, and it was kind of joyous. And I've been in many churches where, you're lucky if you can find the bulletin. They're sitting on a counter somewhere. Everybody else knows what they're doing, and you're just standing there. A church having ushers can play an important part in greeting people and making them feel welcome and seating them. If you see a new person, maybe sit with them. Of course, COVID changed everything. Like, I'm always conscientious now about the mask, but sit with them and can I sit with you during the service? And we follow the bulletin that's up on the screen. It was just telling them what you're doing. Engages them.
Yeah.
So for me, I don't remember faces and people very well. I can tell you very often I say hi, I'm somebody else confused. And I find out that they've been attending for 3 weeks, or 3 months, or, how do you recognize the new person? I can recognize a person that is a different racial color, I can recognize a person that, is dressed differently than me. But, to recognize somebody that hasn't been in the pews before, they don't have a sign for that.
You know, what are some strategies, by the way, for, we've all been in this before, right?
We have name tags that we don't wear.
Oh, well, okay, but, you
I
know,
introduce myself or say, oh, I haven't met you, I don't know your name or something.
Yeah.
Not saying you're new or not new.
Yeah.
or Have you been here before? I
Uh-huh.
know more like saying, I don't remember your name.
Okay.
I'm Martha."
that's one, good, that's one strategy. What are some other ways that you can?
I think recognizing the discomfort that a person has if they come to shoot.
Well, there's that, but I'm just talking about general sense of that, you know,
rather
just
than the church.
getting us more comfortable with greeting somebody that we may or may not know, or think we should know, or not, you know, that kind of thing. What are some strategies that we can, you know, that we can share? So, you know, I don't know your name or something. What are some,
I was, I was an associate pastor of a large church, so we worship, when I first came there, about 500 people on a Sunday. And I am terrible with names and I'm terrible with recognition. So the process I used was simply, I'm not sure if I met you or not.
yeah,
I'm Stan, and that seemed to be okay.
yeah. If it's somebody that maybe you've seen before, but you know, you think you've seen, but you're not 100% sure, you could say, I've learned, so it's like, you know, help me with your name. You know, I'm Matt, help me with your name.
What would be wrong with us borrowing the Great Clips line? What brings you here today?
Sure,
And if somebody says, you know, I'm just confused or troubled,
yeah,
do you need somebody to pray with you?
yeah.
Would you like to pray with somebody? As opposed to shoving them into a worship service when maybe that's not what they're really after.
Yeah, be interesting, because we don't, you know, we don't always know, and what brings us to this place on a Sunday morning is not always the same for everybody.
Which
Okay.
reminds me, back to the Alliance Church. They're a seeker church and they are aimed, their whole aim is for the unchurched folks out there, young folks who have never been to church that don't know the Bible, blah, blah, blah. Very perky service, drums and guitars and contemporary music. Messages that are given in contemporary wording, etc. Oh, now why am I saying this? No, where was that train of thought going?
Their purpose?
Huh?
Their purpose?
Their purpose is to reach out to people just to get them to start to come to church and get the message. And, you know, it's a kind of a different kind of worshiping thing, because it doesn't assume you come from a Christian background.
So what I kind of steers back into here, that the idea, what I want to bring up is that you know, we've had a joint elder and deacons meeting the other night. Somebody asked about, we had a security or team. Remember, we had that group. What happened with that? So, well, we're not really doing that right now. But an act of hospitality, which is a Christian thing, right? I mean, it's not just Christian, but it's one of the things that we value as followers of Jesus Christ, hospitality. Then an act of hospitality can also be an act of security. Right? So, you know, I just love it. It's simple, it's non-lethal, you know, and it's effective. And it's within our comfort zone. Some people might feel comfortable carrying a weapon and, you know, all that kind of stuff. I mean, I'll just say I'm not one of them, but I can do that. You know, I can do that. And, you know, I'm in front of people. I'm an extrovert, but I'm also kind of shy. You know, so it's not a natural thing for me necessarily. So I have to develop strategies, and maybe some of you are in the same boat, but, you know, develop strategies around breaking down whatever barrier I have to, introduce somebody to myself to somebody, to welcome them and so on. And I'm just saying that I think we can all, do these, do some of these things, and then we'll make a difference. Don't have to budget for it. We don't have to have meetings for it. Let's do it.
I just think also though, putting yourself in their position, like when somebody said that they go to church and nobody
Yeah.
speaks to them. I mean, we've been there.
Yeah.
I've been there, but I just think that if we stop and thought about that and how you felt when nobody talked to you, that try to go and make the effort.
Mhm.
Just to say, hi, good morning, or I'll say, I haven't seen you here before, but I say that because, we have 2 services, and so maybe they've been coming to the first service.
Yeah,
But I just thinking about how that person feels, because we've been there.
right.
I have a connected question to this, but you can tell me, Matt, if this is not the time, but we've had trouble getting people to sign up to be ushers in the past. And I'm just wondering what gets in the way, what's an obstacle for people wanting to be ushers? How come people don't sign up? for it?
Tardiness.
One thing I think I've heard is that sometimes people fear making a commitment, and if their plans change or something like that, which is in some cases kind of ironic because there are people that are pretty regular anyway, but I don't know.
I think COVID was just such a disruptor. It just kind of
It did, but it was way, it was before COVID too,
Yeah.
that it was hard to
Well,
get ushers.
before COVID, well, true, hard to get ushers, but before COVID, we had a group that did the crisis training. And we had some people who were tagged to be security and keep their antenna up. Who's coming in and what's going on at the doors. We had an active prayer team. After the service, if you wanted personal prayer, things just kind of like unraveled.
I'm not
Yeah.
sure if ushers. From, from my experience, sometimes ushers are not the people who are really hospitality oriented. They do their job of bulletins and offerings and whatever. But people who are really focused on hospitality have a different mindset than doing a job. And it takes something different. So I don't think to rely upon ushers to be this kind of person that they're talking about here. Some ushers can do it.
Well, yeah, and
Oh, I haven't seen that.
Right. What like an usher could be is that, you have people that, you have a regular basis or regular crew of people, that might help in some regard, that an usher, if we're talking about it from a matter of hospitality and / security, an usher might, just say, hey, Paul, will you go over and talk to this person over here, or, hey, great to have you with us. Hey, are you new here? Let me introduce you to Paul. And I've done that, not necessarily Paul, maybe Paul, but I've done that with people.
Even
So-
before Vicky was doing the recruiting of ushers, we had also a definition of greeters that was separate from ushers.
right.
And I think you're probably talking more about the greeter position rather than the usher. The usher tells people where to go.
Ushers usually, all they do is just hand a bulletin, and getting an usher to see people. Oh, yeah, right. All right, next thing, I really want a response to this. I don't know, kind of shook me here. Can somebody read the sentence, the next number 3?
The American Civil Liberties Union.
Yep.
Now estimates that 1.7 million students are in schools with police, but
Oh,
no
not
counselors.
Yeah, no counselors, right?
6 million students are in schools with police, but no school psychologists, and 10 million students are in schools with police, but no social workers. What is your response to these figures?
It's upside down.
It's upside down.
I think it's how you view the problem, because certain people view school shootings like they're a criminal to be addressed. And so therefore their answer is more of a law enforcement task, right? Whereas other people, we would see there's a student who's troubled that needs resources to keep them from getting to that point. And so I think there's just a very big divide in this country about how you view that solution. And so if you can't even like see the side of maybe we could prevent this from happening because you're just like, it's inevitable, it's gonna happen, then it's hard to get those people to understand the need for those other resources.
And I really think it's an attitude about how to train people who are on the school premises. Law enforcement is a totally different kind of training than psychology. Should it be? I mean, is there a way to integrate some best practices from these disciplines and make sure that it's not just one person doing it, but that teachers have the ability to get some of this training too? I think that's what opened my eyes in this book, is that you don't have to be the police officer to stop a mass shooter. You don't have to be, you know? We just
Well, and
assume that
even-
there's a police
Right.
answer.
Well, even then, if you remember from the book, they basically say that not only do you not have to be a police officer, but a police officer is not going to make any difference. I mean, right, was the take I got from that.
Actually, it says the rates of death was nearly 3 times higher in schools with armed police officer. Or a security guard present.
Because
That may be a
often-
funny statistic.
Well,
And I
well,
was wondering about it too.
often the shooter wants to be killed.
That was one of the things they talked
It's
about.
a suicidal.
But I'm not sure if that's what
Yeah,
this is based on, and I'm wondering about this, but.
right.
Yeah, no, you put the police where the troubled kids are.
But that's
I don't know that that's always the case.
No,
Well, here's what Port Angeles has going. So the police department in Port Angeles School District have a partnership where there's one school resource officer, police officer for the district. And that person is kind of on call for whatever is needed as a response. They're not necessarily there preventatively. Well, I don't know. And then we have one school counselor for about every 300 to 400 kids. There's one school counselor at every single building, plus more at the high school and middle school. And then our school psychologists basically just test kids to see if they need special education. And they're spread extremely thin, so they don't do any actual counseling, they just test and present the results. But we're pretty, as far as averages across the nation or state, we're pretty good in having one counselor for every 300 to 400 kids. That's actually, it's a little bit higher than is recommended by the American School Counselors Association. That we're supposed to have one to every 250 kids, but at least the district has made a commitment to having a certified school counselor in every elementary school and middle
And
school.
do they counsel?
Oh, yeah, I do all the time.
When I was teaching, I don't know that the counselors didn't counsel,
What level were you at? High school?
junior high.
Junior? Yeah, we spend our days interacting with kids and groups of kids all day long.
But if a student needs counseling, are they referred to counseling outside of the school district, like behavioral?
It depends what the issues are. Like, we're not supposed to do, I'm a licensed therapist, but we're not supposed to do therapy as school counselors. It's kind of outside of our wheelhouse. And so if a kid needs more than about 6 solution focused kind of issues that are related to school, any more than that, then we suggest the parents. We can recommend that the parents consider the possibility of taking them, but there's such a lack of available counselors for youth around here that There's big waiting lists and things generally.
John?
So the front line has got to be the teacher that has the firsthand experience with the students, recognizing who needs to go to a higher level of counseling. Or, you know, recognizing long before they're ready to shoot somebody that they've got a problem, and then how we deal with the problem at that point. You know, it takes counselors, takes people who are specialists, but our first line should be the teacher, and the teacher should have enough training in emotional problems to recognize who's at risk, who needs something special at that point.
Yeah, we don't formally get trained in that as teachers. It kind of comes with experience, I think, and personality of the teacher. Some of them are out, I'm here to teach the content. I'm not dealing with this other stuff at all, so.
What is this, what are these statistics or this data, what does this data tell us about where our priorities are relative to, you know, gun violence and or violence in schools?
Reactive and not proactive.
Yeah, reactive, not proactive. One of the drawbacks with a, you know, school resource officer is that, you know, I'm not saying this happens all the time, but I think it does happen, that behavior in schools that might otherwise have been dealt with just in a disciplinary fashion is more apt to become a legal matter, criminal matter, that sort of thing. Which changes the scope. It's along the line of what we saw in the video a couple weeks ago, when, you know, you report somebody and all of a sudden it becomes a, you know, they have all these legal things, and you know, as opposed to just being a friend. That was the example. I can't remember the gentleman's name. And whereas school funding gone over the decades, has it gone down? Up?
Well, and that's what they
Same, I mean,
talk about, all the, like, you know, teachers need to be able to be equipped to do this and stuff, and I'm just thinking like, their workload is so insane for what you're paying them, and then you're telling them they only work 9 months a year and they're not worth getting paid for. I mean, you just, you know, you hear these conversations all the time, they don't really want to fund
Yeah.
what teachers do, so you're asking them to do a lot and not really, you know, financially supporting them.
But I think, you know, looking at something like this, if we made it a priority, or you made it individually a priority to say, you know, I want to make a difference. Like, if you're talking about gun laws, that's less of a thing you're going to impact in Port Angeles, right? If you're going to impact anything with gun laws, it's going to be, the nearest is going to be Olympia, and then beyond, you know, Washington or something, DC. But you know, to say we want to make this more a priority in our schools, well, that's within our school district, isn't it? Or school district, wherever you might live. And so, you know, these are things that we can actively be involved in on some level to impact change, whether it's, you know, going to a school board and talking about levies or, you know, bonds or, you know, things like that to support, you know, financially support our schools so that they have the resources. Teachers, counselors, staff have resources to be able to meet some of the needs in our community. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that out because I again, you know, there's a lot of stuff in the book, but back to the, you know, the reason that I wanted to have this discussion with everybody is because I think it gives us things that we can actually do, you know, and changes that we can make.
And I would say in Port Angeles with that, it really boils, you know, teachers are expected to teach their content and all of that, and it's great. But it really boils down to also empowering teachers and saying to teachers and expecting of teachers that they're also paying attention to the relationships between them and their students and between students and each other. And the district has put out, you know, here's ways to do that, here's ways to do that. And some teachers take a hold of that and some don't. And so I think, you know, saying to the district, look, this book again highlights how important it is that teachers pay attention to their students as people and have relationships with them as people. I think that's what it is.
I was gonna say, we might have an extra copy, bring it to Marty if you want.
I'll keep in mind.
Yeah,
Yeah, and actually, my school principal right now is way into school safety and so forth.
Yeah.
She would latch on.
yeah, seriously, we've got a couple extra copies for welcome. Marty Brewers from referring to our
It's
superintendent
just,
school.
no, I was just gonna ask Vicky, is that what is Port Angeles, what the school district, do they have something about bullying?
Yeah, well.
Okay.
So the curriculum that's been adopted for the elementary schools to teach includes at sixth grade level, a specific bullying prevention curriculum unit. And I'm teaching that actually right now with our sixth graders at my school. It's not happening at all the schools, though. I just found out 2 days ago that not all of the school counselors are implementing that. We do have also separate bullying prevention curriculum K-6. At the middle school level, I don't know. They have Character Strong. The district adopted this program called Character Strong. And it's about character traits like kindness, empathy, and so forth, but it doesn't specifically address bullying. Like it's supposedly preventative, as in we're working on relationships between kids with it. But
So in the grade school, there's no real.
there's curriculum
there is,
available.
but
The degree, the percentage of counselors and teachers that are implementing it. Not great.
I want to skip down to third from the bottom here, but going to page 186 and 187 that have the charts here. So it's in the chapter on hope with the three charts here is individuals, institutions, and as a society. So they're kind of recapping some of the things from the book. And things that we might be able to do. So can somebody read the ones for individuals?
trauma, build relationships and mentor young people.
Okay.
Crisis, develop strong skills in crisis intervention and suicide prevention. Social proof, monitor our own media consumption. And opportunity, safe storage of firearms. If you see or hear something, say something.
Any questions on any of these?
Well, I guess the crisis, develop strong skills in crisis intervention and suicide prevention. As individuals, a person would have to really seek that out for
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah. I think you can probably develop some basic skills in that could go a long way for what most of us are going to encounter.
And I think
Even
as
some-
parents, we don't say, now we're gonna sit down and learn crisis intervention, but we certainly teach our kids how to deal with emotional crises. So I think all of these apply to parents as well as individual people.
I was
Well-
gonna say, just even something as simple as being sure everyone is educated about the National Suicide Hotline, you know how to call it. Would you be able to tell a young person that they can call that number?
Yeah,
Yeah, and even also letting people know that asking someone if they're thinking of suicide does not cause them to commit suicide. It doesn't put that
Right.
idea in their head.
Oh, yeah.
It's actually a good practice to just ask.
Yeah.
Directly.
yeah, because then it makes them verbalize, right? So you're thinking about killing yourself?
Yeah.
Oh.
So you just have to be aware of people. I mean, I look back on my nephew,
Yeah.
who is 18. Who shot himself.
Yeah.
Did any of us see it? No. Or if we did we ignore the signs?
Mm.
I don't know. As I look back on it, I can honestly say, yeah, I can think of something.
No.
Now,
Well, now, right, yeah.
Now, yeah. But I just,
Yeah, it's hard to, you know, and I think some of these things might be, if you know somebody, you know, if you know that somebody is suicidal, for instance. You know, a relationship or a family member, somebody, you know, somebody that you know, then you might seek out resources to help your, you know, self in terms of, you know, building awareness as in addition to referring somebody, you know, it's sort of like dealing with an alcoholic maybe, right? That you would, you know, you might encourage somebody to go to AA or something like that, but also, you know, there are groups to support families of, so that you can develop your own kinds of skills. I want to point out the social proof thing about monitoring our own social or our media consumption. That, you know, I think what I've heard today has been a little more critical of maybe right-wing media, but you know, it's everybody, you know, that it's so easy for us to find our own sort of a bubble and fighting misinformation. Is this what? So what's the? You want to say anything about this or?
I can, it's a video class,
Okay.
it's from the great courses, which I'm sort of hooked on and generally take a 30-minute lecture every day. Anyway, this one is Fighting Misinformation, Digital Media Literacy, which comes up in the book. And so it's something we could do. How can you tell if something that's said on the media is true or not? And this is like 8 lectures in one disc, which makes it a pretty people, and you never want to pay the full price on one of these. It's way up there. But I never paid more than $50, and for one disc, it's probably 30 or 40. So anyway, that's something you can do to improve your own media literacy. And this one is Skepticism 101, How to Think Like a Scientist, which the instructor he calls himself a skeptic, and most anyone else would call him an atheist probably. But there's one lesson in here on mistakes in thinking that we all make, biases like confirmation bias. I think is touched on it there. And he starts with confirmation bias, which is probably the most common, and then just goes on and on and on with different biases that people can acquire in their thinking skills or lack thereof. So anyway, got one lesson in that one applies to what we're talking about here also.
Hey, and one thing that you can do is don't forward stuff on your Facebook page or in your email. I would say virtually never forward something to everybody in your contact list. Why would you do that? But if you see something that you receive and you're like, wow, I didn't know that. Well, look it up first before you know, I don't know how many times I get things from people that, you know, that whole, I think I preached on it a couple years ago, the whole thing with Mr. Rogers and, you know, tattoos, and he was like a Navy SEAL or something like that. It's all a bunch of BS, but you know, it catches fire and on, you know, online, and people send that stuff along, and you know, so and there are ways, you know, you can become more savvy to go online to find out the truth behind things. That stat about the, you know, school resource thing, you know, being more likely or whatever, I would like to unpack that some more, and there might be a footnote that you could research on it. So
And there was,
yeah, so even in here, you know, it's stuff worth looking at, and you know, some science, some of the science in here might, with more data, be all, you know, changed or disproved or something, but you know, that is kind of the nature of science things. So as institutions, somebody read that one, top of 187. What can we do institutionally?
trauma, create warm environments, trauma-informed practices, universal trauma screening, crisis, build care teams and referral processes, train staff. Social proof, teach media literacy, limit active shooter drills for children, opportunity, situational crime prevention, anonymous reporting system.
And, obviously, I think, relative to this, probably the easiest thing that we can do, as a church, as an institution, is probably the creating warm environments. And, kind of building up that act of hospitality, alone can go a long way. There might be other steps, whether we'd want to reinstitute any of the things that we've done before, I suppose up in the air too. And then as a society, it's the broader 30,000 foot view. Somebody reads.
Trauma. Teach social emotional learning in schools, build a stronger social safety net with adequate jobs, childcare, maternity leave, health insurance, and access to higher education. Crisis, reduce stigma and increase knowledge of mental health, open access to high quality mental health treatment, fund counselors in school. Social proof, no notoriety protocol, hold media and social media companies accountable for their content. Opportunity, universal background checks, red flag laws, permit to purchase, magazine limits, wait periods, and assault and rifle. It's like assault rifle ban.
Okay, yeah. Pretty simple, huh? And and some of these things, I don't want to get into it exactly, but the idea of social emotional learning, I was kind of surprised to read that in some circles is seen as like bad.
Yeah.
And I maybe I don't know enough, but to me, it seems like it's just taking into account that learning is not just what's on the book, and in a lesson plan, but learning has to do with, how kids interact with one another and some of the things that they can learn about being in community. That's part of what schools provide, is that space. So,
So how do we individually do something as a society for it to affect what our society is doing? And the one that seems possible as an individual is letters to the editor. When we've got elections, look a little closer at who you're electing and then write letters to your congressman or the people that are doing. Don't just make it a once every 4 years project.
yeah, there's definitely ways. I've never really been involved in like political advocacy so much. But some of the people that I went to Israel and Palestine with have been active in different areas, working with their congressmen in whatever Snohomish County and stuff. And what they have relayed is that their congressman they have a number of aides, they're younger people, but that have been open to listening to them, meeting with them, maybe by Zoom or however they do it. And then take that back to their congressman, that information. So there seems to be a willingness, and I think that might be similar for many Congress people, that that there are opportunities if you want to have conversation or you want to gather people around a conversation to make an impact. There are representatives, right? So that's one form that people can do.
I have something on my mind and I gotta say it before we end this class. If I could do something legislatively, it would be to hold gun owners responsible and accountable for securing their weapons. And to have very tough penalties for those who are careless and reckless with their guns.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Well, and some of those are conversations you might be able to have with people. I don't know, if where you are on the, in the Second Amendment kind of conversation, and everything. But I think that's a conversation that people can have, like, I'm not a gun owner, but, I've had conversations like that with friends that have many, guns or gun owners. And, they have gun safes and they're responsible kind of gun owners and they can appreciate that. And because that to me says that they understand the lethality of these weapons and what it means to secure them or to have, ammunition separate, and, those kinds of things. So, those are some places you might be able to gain some traction, conversation with people. Because whatever is to be, passed is going to have greater impact if it can be done, in a bipartisan, full spectrum kind of manner. Well, we've just a couple minutes here as we're wrapping up. Any last thoughts on the book, or where you feel it's getting traction for you in any form?
Well, I will take this to the school district for
Yeah.
sure. And I'm also just curious if we can move ahead with this idea of usher hospitality people coming back to our church.
The one thing I wish, I didn't have any problem with the way the stuff was presented in the book, but it's because I agree with their perspective. And I think a lot of us in the class, based on people's responses as well. If I had some of my very conservative acquaintances or friends read this and they got into the first chapter about what's wrong with America, they would shut the book and they wouldn't go through the rest of the book. And I understand that their bias in the way they look at things is because of their experience, both as academics and in working with the populations of people that they did. We all have biases that we come to it. I wish the way it was written had been a little bit more even-handed about that, or just in the way things were phrased, not necessarily eliminating those discussions, but because I just think there's a huge section of people who need to read this and they wouldn't
Yeah.
because of how it starts.
Well, maybe you could, if you're reading it with somebody else, you could start like with the Bible. I tell people, don't read the Bible from cover to cover. This makes sense. That maybe you don't start at the beginning here, you start somewhere else.
I think there are people that need this in our church, but they're not here.
Maybe, yeah,
So what do you do?
yeah, that's a good point, though. I mean,
Well, I think, I like Sarah's point, and I think it should be applied broader. That's the mindset I think you need to have when you reach out to people on these topics, not just this book specifically, but the issues that we face. We've identified a lot of sort of systemic structural problems in our culture that are resulting in these things. But how you get to a solution, it's one-on-one. It's starting with common ground and having trust with folks, and then taking the risk and sharing with yourself why you view things the way you do based on the evidence. And I've seen that happen. It's hard, it's nuanced, and it depends on the personality of the people you're talking with, but who better to know that than you?
any other closing thoughts?
I guess as a church, we said under institutions, trauma, create warm environments. I guess I've never known a church where most of the members, anyway, of a given congregation haven't said we're a very friendly and warm church. But I also know that a lot of visitors to those churches don't necessarily feel that.
Yeah.
So I guess I would like us to think about really seriously, what does that mean for us to be a warm, inviting,
Yeah.
congregation?
Well, and recognize that there's kind of a fine line. I, for one, when I go someplace like a church, I don't necessarily want, the cookies and somebody to be my best friend when I walk through the door. But I don't mind being, and I kind of expect that, I'd like to be seen. You know, so I'm not to downplay, you know, your experience. I'm sorry if that same came
No,
across
no,
kind of
that's
crass.
okay.
But, you know, because there's different levels, but just to be recognized, like, hey, it's good to have you with us today. You know, that, you know, that's, you know, that's some kind of a recognition piece, but so it's gonna vary, but yeah, there's,
I went to one congregation as a layperson. And there were 5 men who came up to me and introduced themselves. And after the 5th one, I said, you know, what's going on here? Because normally men don't introduce themselves to strangers. And the comment was really interesting. He said, we've all come from somewhere.
Hmm.
And that is just a really interesting statement.
Yeah.
Recognition of who they were.
I'm told I need to go. We do need to wrap up. Thank you for that, Don. No, you're right. Yeah. Well, let's close. Lord. As we have read this, I think you have stirred things in each of us, an awareness perhaps, and hopefully a plan. That's something that, or some things that we might engage in ourselves. So whatever seeds you have planted in us, or the seeds that are still being planted, may they indeed find nourishment and growth in our lives, benefit of those who are really in need, and the safety of others. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.